Welcome. So we're now going to work through these notes here, the determinant and inverse matrix. Let's begin by talking about the identity matrix. So what is an identity matrix? A square matrix which contains all ones along the leading diagonal. So that is the top left to the bottom right, and all other elements are zeros. So if we look here, here's a 2 by 2 identity matrix. And as you can see, the leading diagonals are full of ones, everything else is zero. Here's a 3 by 3 identity matrix. As you can see, the leading diagonal is full of ones, everything else is zero. Okay, let's keep reading. When any matrix is multiplied by an identity matrix, it is like multiplying by 1. The answer remains the same as the original matrix. The letter I is used to represent the identity matrix. So let's just see this in action for a second. What this is saying to me is if I have the matrix A, and I multiply it by an identity matrix, what I'm going to end up with is just A. That's it. And an interesting property here is it actually doesn't matter the order in which you do the multiplication. So you could do the multiplication as I times A, and it's still going to you end up with A. That's still going to be what it ends up with. So this is like when you go, 1 times 3 is equal to 3. So an identity matrix is like multiplying by 1. Or you could go 3 times 1 is equal to 3. So an identity matrix is like multiplying by 1 for a matrix. Okay, now where is this kind of all leading up to? Well, to get a little bit ahead of ourselves, let me give you this scenario. Let me say we've got matrix A, and I want to multiply it by something and get an identity matrix out. What would I have to multiply it by? Well, let's go back to a nice example with numbers here. This is like saying I've got the number 3 and I want to multiply it by something to get the number 1 out. What would I have to multiply 3 by? And hopefully you would recognize, well, I would multiply 3 by the inverse of 3, which is 1 on 3. And so too, if we're going to get an identity matrix out, what we're going to multiply A by is the inverse of A, which we denote with that. So A raised to the negative 1 there. This is what we call an inverse matrix. Inverse matrix. And that's kind of what we're leading up to in this lesson, what we're trying to figure out. So that's what it's kind of all about. And now we're going to have to learn some new words before we get to the inverse matrix. We're first going to have to learn about something called the determinant, and then we'll get to the inverse matrix. But that's kind of giving you a bit of a bird's eye view as to what it is we're doing and why we're doing it. So if it doesn't make much sense now, don't stress. As we dive into the rest of these notes, things will become clearer.